On September 10, 1944, a damaged P-51D Mustang force landed in a field near Rechlin, Germany. The American pilot bailed out successfully, but his aircraft remained largely intact. Within hours, Wehrmacht soldiers had secured the site. Within days, the Mustang was at Erprobungsstelle Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's primary aircraft testing facility. Within 2 weeks, a German test pilot named Hans Werner Lerche would file a report that ended with a single devastating sentence. "We cannot match this aircraft's performance with our current technology. The war is already decided." This is the story of how Germany's finest pilots and engineers confronted the reality of American technological superiority by flying the very aircraft that was destroying the Luftwaffe. It's a story told not from the perspective of Allied victory, but from the German side, of men who understood they were fighting with obsolete equipment against an enemy with unlimited resources and superior engineering. Erprobungsstelle Rechlin was established in the early 1930s as Germany's equivalent to America's Wright Field or Britain's Farnborough. Located north of Berlin, the facility sprawled across thousands of acres and included multiple airfields, test laboratories, wind tunnels, and workshops. By 1944, Rechlin employed over 2,000 people: pilots, engineers, mechanics, and support staff. The facility's mission was simple: evaluate every German aircraft design and every captured enemy aircraft to determine strengths, weaknesses, and tactical applications. Between 1939 and 1945, Rechlin tested virtually every Allied aircraft type: Spitfires, Hurricanes, Yaks, Legies, P-38s, P-47s, and countless others. Each captured aircraft was examined, documented, test-flown, and compared against German equivalents. Hans Werner Lerche was one of Rechlin's most experienced test pilots. Born in 1919, he had joined the Luftwaffe before the war and accumulated thousands of hours in dozens of different aircraft types. Unlike combat pilots who specialized in one or two aircraft, Lerche flew everything: German, Soviet, British, American. His job was to understand each aircraft's characteristics objectively and report findings without propaganda or bias. When the captured Mustang arrived at Rechlin in September 1944, it generated immediate excitement. The P-51D represented the latest variant of an aircraft that had become legendary in combat. Luftwaffe pilots reported that the Mustang could outperform the Bf-109 and Fw-190 in almost every category. But reports from combat were subjective, colored by fear, confusion, and the chaos of aerial warfare. Rechlin's purpose was to obtain objective data. The captured aircraft was P-51D serial number 44-13682. It had been assigned to the 352nd Fighter Group, 8th Air Force, based at Bodney, England. The pilot, Second Lieutenant Robert M. York, had been escorting B-17s to targets near Leipzig when his engine developed problems. He attempted to reach Allied lines but was forced down approximately 40 kilometers inside German territory. York destroyed what he could, smashed instruments, fired his sidearm into the engine, but lacked time to completely disable the aircraft before Wehrmacht troops arrived. German recovery crews transported the damaged Mustang to Rechlin on a flatbed truck. The initial damage assessment was encouraging. The engine had seized due to coolant loss from flak damage, but the airframe was structurally sound. Most instruments were damaged or destroyed, but the basic flight controls, landing gear, and hydraulic systems remained functional. Engineers estimated 2 to 3 weeks for repairs using salvaged parts from other captured P-51s. While mechanics worked on repairs, engineers began their preliminary examination. They measured everything: wingspan, wing area, empty weight, fuel capacity. They photographed every component, they examined the construction techniques, and they were immediately impressed. The first thing that struck German engineers was the Mustang's manufacturing quality. The riveting was perfect, flush rivets throughout to reduce drag. The aluminum skin fit precisely with no gaps or misalignments. The panel fasteners were standardized and interchangeable. Everything suggested mass production methods far more advanced than Germany's increasingly improvised manufacturing. One engineer's report noted, "The construction demonstrates American industrial superiority. Every component shows precision manufacturing. No hand-fitting required for assembly. This aircraft could be produced on an assembly line with semi-skilled labor. Our Bf-109 requires skilled craftsmen for final assembly. The Americans have solved mass production while maintaining quality." The Packard Merlin engine fascinated German engineers. It was essentially a British Rolls-Royce Merlin built under license in America with American manufacturing techniques. Luftwaffe intelligence already knew about the Merlin. Captured Spitfires had revealed its capabilities, but the American-built version showed refinements and quality that exceeded the British original. German engine specialists examined the supercharger, fuel injection system, coolant system, and metallurgy. What they found was sobering. The Americans were using advanced alloys that Germany couldn't match. The manufacturing tolerances were tighter than German standards. The quality control was superior. One metallurgist report concluded, "The engine represents at least 2 years advancement beyond our Daimler-Benz and BMW designs. We lack the materials and manufacturing precision to replicate it." But the real revelation came when Lerche finally flew the repaired Mustang. The first flight occurred on September 28, 1944. Lerche had studied the aircraft thoroughly, interviewed captured American pilots about handling characteristics, and reviewed what limited intelligence existed on P-51 procedures. He climbed into the cockpit with a mixture of professional curiosity and personal anxiety. This was, after all, an enemy aircraft that had been shooting down his countrymen for months. Starting the Packard Merlin engine was straightforward, similar procedures to other liquid-cooled engines. The engine caught on the first attempt and settled into a smooth idle. Lerche noted the lack of vibration compared to German fighters. He tested the flight controls at smooth and responsive. He checked instruments. Those that survived York's attempted destruction provided basic flight information. Lerche taxied to the runway, advanced the throttle, and was immediately struck by the engine's power. The Mustang accelerated rapidly, far quicker than a Bf-109. At 120 km per hour, he pulled back gently and the aircraft lifted off. Gear retraction was smooth. The climb rate was extraordinary. Lerche's post-flight report was detailed and damning for German aircraft development. Initial climb rate superior to both Bf-109 and Fw-190. Control harmony excellent at all speeds. Visibility from cockpit outstanding. Bubble canopy provides complete situational awareness. Our aircraft have significant blind spots by comparison. Over the following days, Lerche conducted systematic testing. He flew the Mustang through its entire performance envelope. From stall speed to maximum velocity, from sea level to maximum altitude, through every maneuver a combat pilot might attempt. After each flight he filed detailed reports. These reports, preserved in archives after the war, provide a unique window into how Germany's best pilots viewed Allied equipment. The speed tests were particularly revealing. At optimal altitude, approximately 7,600 meters, the P-51D achieved 695 km per hour in level flight. This was approximately 80 km per hour, faster than the Bf-109G model and 50 km per hour faster than the Fw-190A. Only Germany's new jet fighters could match the Mustang's speed, and they had severe operational limitations. Lerche wrote, "The speed advantage is decisive in combat. The Mustang pilot controls the engagement completely. He can attack or disengage at will. Our pilots cannot catch him if he chooses to run." This speed advantage, combined with superior range, makes the P-51 nearly invulnerable to conventional fighter tactics. The range testing was even more sobering. With internal fuel and drop tanks, the Mustang could fly over 2,500 kilometers, enough to escort bombers deep into Germany and return to England. By comparison, the Bf-109 had a combat radius of approximately 660 kilometers, and the Fw-190 less than that. German fighters could defend targets, but they couldn't pursue retreating bombers, or prevent American fighters from dominating German airspace. One of Lerche's reports addressed this directly. "The range disparity makes defense impossible. American fighters can loiter over our airfields waiting for us to land when fuel is exhausted. They control when and where combat occurs. This is not a tactical problem, it is a strategic impossibility." The handling characteristics impressed Lerche perhaps most of all. The Mustang was stable, predictable, and forgiving. It didn't have the Bf-109's tendency to snap roll in tight turns. It didn't have the Fw-190's heavy elevator forces at high speed. American pilots could fly it confidently after minimal training, while German fighters demanded extensive experience to master. Lerche conducted mock combat against German fighters flown by other Rechlin pilots. The results were consistently one-sided. In simulated combat against the Bf-109, Lerche's Mustang won every engagement. The only time German fighters had an advantage was in sustained turning combat below 300 km per hour, a situation that real combat pilots would never allow. One combat evaluation report stated, "In mock combat, The P-51 demonstrates superiority in every scenario except low-speed turning. However, the Mustang pilot can simply refuse to turn fight, using superior speed to disengage and reset the engagement on his terms. Our pilots cannot force the Mustang into unfavorable combat. This represents a fundamental shift in air combat doctrine. The Mustang's 650 caliber machine guns also received attention. German fighters typically carried one or two 20mm cannons and several rifle caliber machine guns. The American approach, 6 heavy machine guns, initially seemed inferior, but analysis revealed advantages. The 50 caliber guns had high rates of fire, flat trajectories, and sufficient hitting power to destroy fighters with short bursts. The ammunition load was substantial, approximately 1,700 rounds total, allowing for multiple engagements. Lerche fired the guns during test flights and noted, "The armament is devastating against fighter targets. Rate of fire and accuracy are superior to our MG-151 cannon. While individual shells have less explosive power than 20mm, the volume of fire compensates. Additionally, the ammunition load allows extended combat operations. Our fighters often return with empty guns after one or two engagements." German engineers were particularly interested in the Mustang's laminar flow wing design. North American aviation had pioneered this wing type, which reduced drag by maintaining smooth airflow over a longer portion of the wing surface. German aerodynamicists understood the theory, but had never successfully implemented it. Engineers at Rechlin measured the wing profile precisely, documented the surface finish, and tried to understand how Americans achieved the necessary manufacturing precision. The conclusion was discouraging. The laminar flow wing requires surface smoothness within plus or minus 0.05mm over the entire span. This is beyond our current manufacturing capabilities, especially under wartime conditions. Even if we could build one prototype, mass production would be impossible. As the testing continued through October 1944, the accumulated data painted an increasingly bleak picture. The P-51 Mustang was superior to German fighters in almost every measurable category. It was faster, had longer range, better visibility, more reliable engines, superior manufacturing, and greater firepower capacity. The only advantages German fighters retained were rate of roll and the sustained turn rate at low speeds, advantages that mattered little when the Mustang could dictate engagement terms. Senior Luftwaffe officers visited Rechlin to observe the testing and read the reports. Their reactions varied. Some refused to believe the data, insisting that German pilots were simply not being aggressive enough in combat. Others understood immediately that they were facing insurmountable technological disadvantage. A few began planning how to communicate this reality to higher command without being accused of defeatism, a dangerous position in late 1944 Germany. General Adolf Galland, commander of Luftwaffe fighters, reviewed the Rechlin reports in November 1944. Galland was a realist who understood air warfare better than most German officers. He had been arguing for months that the Luftwaffe needed radical changes, more jets, better training, different tactics, but faced resistance from Göring and Hitler. The Mustang test reports gave him documentation to support his arguments. Galland wrote to Göring, "The American P-51 represents technological superiority that we cannot overcome with current aircraft. Our pilots are brave and skilled, but bravery cannot compensate for a 50 km/h speed disadvantage and 3-to-1 range disadvantage. We must accelerate jet fighter production or accept that we cannot defend German airspace against American daylight operations." Göring's response was typical of late-war German leadership. He rejected the assessment as defeatist and ordered increased production of conventional fighters. The Mustang test data was classified and distribution was limited to prevent damage to morale. But the men at Rechlin knew the truth. They had flown the enemy's aircraft. They had measured its performance, they had documented its superiority, and they understood what it meant. Lerche flew the captured Mustang multiple times between September and December 1944. Each flight reinforced his initial conclusions. In his personal diary, discovered after the war, he wrote candidly, "Flying the P-51 is like glimpsing the future. Everything about it suggests a nation with unlimited resources, advanced engineering, and rational development priorities. Meanwhile, we are building aircraft with wooden components because aluminum is scarce. We are installing captured French engines in our fighters because our factories are being bombed. We are sending poorly trained pilots into combat in obsolete aircraft against opponents flying machines like the Mustang. The outcome is inevitable. German engineers attempted to apply lessons from the Mustang to improve existing aircraft. They examined the flush riveting and recommended implementing it on the FW-190. They studied the laminar flow wing and proposed a research program. They analysed the Packard Merlin and suggested improvements to the Daimler-Benz DB605 engine. None of it mattered. By late 1944, Germany lacked the resources, materials and time to implement major changes. Factories were being bombed. Skilled workers were being conscripted. Aluminum was scarce. Fuel was critically short. Even if German engineers had designed a fighter superior to the Mustang, they couldn't have produced it in meaningful numbers. The irony was bitter. Germany had started the war with arguably the world's most advanced air force. The Bf-109 had been superior to early British and American fighters. German tactics had been revolutionary. Luftwaffe pilots had dominated the early war years. But while Germany fought on multiple fronts with increasingly limited resources, America had spent 3 years building an aviation industry that dwarfed the rest of the world combined. By 1944, American factories were producing aircraft at rates Germany couldn't match. North American aviation alone built more than 15,000 P-51 Mustangs during the war. That was more than total German fighter production in some years, and the Mustang was just one of several American fighter types being mass-produced simultaneously. The test pilots and engineers at Rechlin understood this reality perhaps better than anyone else in Germany. They saw the quality of American equipment. They read intelligence reports on American production numbers. They knew that for every captured Mustang they tested, 1,000 more were being built in California factories, operating 3 shifts per day. One engineer's report from December 1944 captured this despair. "We have analysed the P-51 thoroughly. We understand why it is superior. We could, given unlimited time and resources, design something comparable. But this is irrelevant. The Americans are producing the P-51 at rates we cannot comprehend. They have resources we cannot match. They have a rational industrial system while ours collapses. Technical analysis is pointless when the fundamental problem is industrial capacity." The psychological impact on German pilots who flew the captured Mustang was significant. Several operational pilots visited Rechlin to evaluate the aircraft. They returned to their units with a new understanding of what they faced in combat. Some became fatalistic. Others redoubled their determination to fight harder despite the odds. A few quietly began preparing for Germany's inevitable defeat. Oberst Johannes Steinhoff, a decorated fighter ace who visited Rechlin in late 1944, wrote in his memoirs, "I flew the P-51 for 20 minutes. It was like being transported to a different world. Everything worked. Everything was refined. Everything was thoughtfully designed. Then I climbed back into my Bf-109, with its cramped cockpit, oil-streaked windscreen, and temperamental engine, and understood for the first time that we had already lost." The captured Mustang remained at Rechlin through the winter of 1944 and into early 1945. It was flown regularly for training purposes, allowing German pilots to familiarize themselves with its flight characteristics and develop theoretical counter-tactics. These training flights were useful but ultimately futile. Knowing how the Mustang flew didn't change the fact that German fighters couldn't match its performance. In April 1945, as Soviet forces approached Rechlin from the east, staff began evacuating. Critical documents were destroyed or shipped west. Aircraft were scattered to prevent capture. The captured Mustang was flown to Bavaria, where it ultimately fell into American hands after Germany's surrender. The Americans were amused to discover their own aircraft bearing Luftwaffe markings. Hans Werner Lerche survived the war and was extensively debriefed by Allied intelligence. He provided detailed accounts of testing Allied aircraft at Rechlin. His reports confirmed what Allied intelligence had suspected, that Germany understood its technological disadvantage by late 1944 but lacked the means to overcome it. In post-war interviews, Lerche was remarkably candid about his experiences flying the P-51. "It was the finest piston engine fighter I ever flew, better than our best, better than anything the British had. It represented everything Germany could no longer produce: quality, precision, reliability, performance. Flying it was professionally fascinating and personally devastating. Every flight reminded me that we were fighting with obsolete equipment against an opponent with unlimited resources." The technical reports produced at Rechlin regarding the P-51 Mustang were recovered by Allied forces after the war. They provided valuable insights into German evaluation methods and confirmed Allied assessment of the Mustang's capabilities. But more importantly, they revealed the psychological impact on German aviation professionals who understood they were fighting an unwinnable war. One of the final reports from Rechlin, dated March 1945, concluded, "The P-51D represents the culmination of Allied fighter development. It combines speed, range, firepower, and handling in a single airframe. We cannot match its performance with current technology. We cannot match its production rate with our industrial capacity. We cannot develop countermeasures in the time remaining. The war is decided. That final sentence, "The war is decided," appeared in multiple Rechlin reports from late 1944 onwards. It was a stunning admission from Germany's most professional aviation testing organization. These were not defeatists or cowards. They were engineers and pilots who had spent years evaluating aircraft objectively. They had looked at the data, flown the aircraft, and reached an inescapable conclusion. The story of the captured P-51 at Rechlin is ultimately a story about the limits of skill and courage when facing technological and industrial superiority. German pilots were brave. German engineers were talented. But bravery and talent could not overcome America's ability to produce 15,000 advanced fighters, while Germany struggled to build a few hundred obsolete ones. The Luftwaffe pilots who fought against P-51s in the final year of the war knew they were outmatched. Some fought anyway out of duty, others fought because they had no choice. A few fought because they didn't know how to do anything else. But the men at Rechlin who had flown the Mustang themselves understood the truth. The war in the air was already over. Everything that followed was simply waiting for the inevitable conclusion. Hans Werner Lerche's final diary entry about the captured Mustang, written in April 1945 as Rechlin was evacuated, captured this reality perfectly. "I flew the P-51 today for what will probably be the last time. I climbed to 8,000 meters and flew west toward where the American bombers come from. The sky was empty. I thought about all the German pilots who face aircraft like this every day. I thought about how it must feel to know your equipment is obsolete before you take off. I thought about how many died not from lack of skill but from lack of adequate aircraft. Then I turned east, descended and landed. Tomorrow we evacuate. The war continues, but it was already decided the moment we couldn't match aircraft like the P-51. We just didn't admit it. That admission, that Germany had lost the technological war and therefore the shooting war, came too late to matter. But it stands as testimony from the German side that World War II was not lost due to any single battle or campaign. It was lost in American factories where unlimited resources and advanced engineering produced weapons that Germany could neither match nor counter. The men at Rechlin who flew the captured Mustang understood this earlier than most. They saw the future, and it wasn't theirs.